Okay, pickle people, today's episode is a little different. We're doing a deep dive into Honolulu's latest line of paddles that have some huge hype at the moment, the Core Reactor series. This includes the very talked about J6CR, as well as the recent addition of the J2CR and the J2CR with the long handle. All of these paddles are currently on pre-order, and the J6CR in particular is already getting into the hands of folks that got in on some of the early batches. And then the J3CR is also en route and should be on Honolulu's site sooner than later. And then we've got this yellow puppy here called the J6CRh, which I'll explain in a little bit. But before we get too far along, I wanted to let you know there will be a giveaway for one of these bad boys, so make sure you watch until the end of the video to find out how to enter. Also, hitting that subscribe button, punching that little bell notification, and giving this video a hype all help the channel grow and is the main reason I'm able to do these giveaways. So I hope you'll do me a favor and slam those buttons like you're a 13-year-old playing Mortal Kombat at the arcade. It doesn't cost you a thing and it really does help the channel a ton. And now let's get into it. Okay, this is the production model of the J6CR, and the next batch is currently available for pre-order. You can get it in this white color as well as in blue, like this one. I was actually super fortunate to get this late pre-production model in December, and I've been maining it ever since. I documented all my playtesting the last several weeks over on my podcast, so if you're not following Is This a Pickleball podcast with Matthew K. Pickleball, you definitely should, as that's where you can always get the most up-to-date info. And this paddle really impressed me from the very first time I hit with it. It's got a great feel and a ton of power, and I mean a ton. And it seems the J6CR's special sauce is a pretty complex recipe, as Honolulu's crammed a lot of new tech inside of this thing. The CR in the name stands for Core Reactor, and it's Honolulu's attempt to create a super powerful paddle that is also incredibly controllable. The owner of Honolulu told me this: our goal is to make a power paddle that's easy to use. And I think that's an absolutely awesome goal, but I know this has been a very difficult combo to achieve in the past, as many paddle companies have tried. But Honolulu has really pushed the innovation boundaries with their CR tech, and I think they might have just achieved the seemingly impossible. Honolulu describes the CR's design as a pivoting core that utilizes dynamic Powerflex technology. And it's more of a system than a single design innovation, as it's comprised of multiple components. So let's break it down. This CT scan provided by Honolulu shows all the internals of a J6CR, and you can see right away this isn't your everyday Gen 4 paddle. While it is a multi-density full foam build with an EPP center core encompassed by an EVA ring, this particular configuration is unlike anything we've seen in a paddle before. First, you do have those notches in the sides, similar to what we've seen in Honolulu's previous NF paddles. For the NF line, that made those paddles feel a bit firmer compared to other multi-density foam paddles, and I definitely think that's at play with their CR line as well. However, if you look at the throat area of the CR, you can see there's a lot going on. This part is what Honolulu calls their core joint technology. Instead of a typical diving board or floating core design, the J6CR interlaces the EVA between two sections of EPP foam at the throat. So there's basically a second smaller piece of EPP at the neck and down and into the handle, effectively creating a split core. Additionally, John Q has pointed out that the cheeks of the paddle have some hard edge foam, the same kind we've seen utilized in many paddle builds for a while now. However, this specific placement is a design choice I don't think we've seen in a Honolulu paddle before. The second major component of Honolulu's dynamic Powerflex technology is something called Flexure Grooves. In this CT scan, you'll notice there are lines in the middle section of the EPP core that look almost like the outline of an upside down shovel. These are flexure grooves, which are precise incisions or indentations intended to let the face flex as it makes impact with the ball. This is something that's been used with golf clubs to help control what the ball does as you strike. In the case of the CR series, it seems these grooves, in combination with the rest of Honolulu's dynamic Powerflex tech, are intended to maximize the paddle sweet spot as well as increase the predictability and power of harder drives in particular. And this is according to Honolulu's owner. and I 100% think this is what's going on. Also, this is a good time to note the difference between my late pre-production unit of the J6CR and the one going out to customers. The pre-pro one I've been testing well over a month now has flexure grooves that were cut into the core material, while the final version has the grooves formed into the core as part of the mold. It seems John Q has actually hit with even earlier versions of the CR and postulates that the molded grooves allow for a firmer feel, while the cut grooves can feel a bit mushier. For me though, I found this specific pre-production version I've been hitting with to perform very similarly to the final version, with the one going out to customers maybe having a tad more pop and firepower than my pre-production version. That said, the ball feel is virtually identical, which goes to highlight how the CR's play characteristics are the result of a number of elements and design choices rather than a single distinct one. Once again, this is a system comprised of a number of components. And while I will be going over the rest of the CR line and the other shapes in a bit, I really want to focus on how the J6CR in particular performs, as I've spent a ton of time on both the pre-pro and now the production version. And I think detailing its play characteristics should help clarify who might generally benefit from utilizing a paddle with Honolulu's dynamic Powerflex technology system. Okay, here are the target specs of Honolulu's J6CR. And the metrics that I'd really like to highlight are its 112 to 118 swing weight range, as well as its 6.2 to 6.8 target twist weight. These are very similar numbers to Honolulu's previous J6NF and J6FC Plus targets, with the J6CR having a tad lower swing weight range than Honolulu's previous full foam lines. However, that's not the whole story. Also, if you do want more info on the NF and FC Plus paddles, I've got a ton of details in this video. While the J6CR might appear to have a tad bit less power on paper than its J6 predecessors, the dynamic Powerflex technology I've been detailing really does change things up. To me, this system results in a paddle that feels like it hits much harder than its NF and FC Plus counterparts whenever you put in a full swing. And my podcast co-host Wilson, who's more of a power hitter than me, absolutely agrees. To me, I think it's definitely got more power than Bread and Butter's Loco line and potentially rivals Selkirk's Boomstick, which has really set the ceiling for power paddles for what seems like a year now. As for pop, this is where things get a bit nuanced when it comes to the J6CR, and I think it's easier to start with this paddle's feel. To me, the J6CR has touch and feel in the soft game that's super reminiscent of honeycomb paddles. All those little bits of core Reactor tech allow me to really control the ball. Resets and drops are a ton of fun. If you have soft hands, this thing can really be a finesse monster. And to me, it has a firmer, more secure feel on soft hits compared to the Boomstick's Ping Gear soft game, but it's not as dense feeling as the upcoming Spartus P1, which is its own little powerhouse. But to be clear, if you swing hard with the J6CR, you do get a ton of power. Putaways, hard drives, those kinds of hits can be lethal with this thing. It's very reminiscent of the dynamic power output we saw with Gen 3 paddles. On hard hits, you really activate another gear with the J6CR. And for those kinds of swings, you can feel and hear the paddle make a more hollow connection with the ball. But that's different than the feel you get on low and even medium power hits with the J6CR. Overall, I'd have to describe the J6CR as feeling rather firm most of the time you make contact with the ball, but it can take on a more hollow feel whenever you rip or slam. And to be honest, its dynamic power output combined with an overall consistent and secure feel is what I like most about the J6CR. It plays soft and gentle up at the kitchen, and then you can have tons of power on hard activated hits. But what I have to emphasize here is there's a huge gap between those two gears. So you can very easily and intuitively control when this paddle switches modes, which has never been the case with nonlinear paddles or paddles with dynamic power outputs. So while this paddle is probably technically nonlinear, the gears are so distinct and the space between them so vast, you don't have any of the issues, pop-ups, unpredictable power output that you usually do with a more typical nonlinear paddle. All that's to say, I think describing this paddle by feel and power is more useful than really trying to pinpoint where it sits pop-wise. That said, my podcast co-host shared with me that he thinks the J6CR is poppier than both the J6NF and J6FC Plus. And I can totally see why he thinks that. He's a player that can really drive, plays a lot of singles, and I think he looks at paddle's feel and play characteristics a bit more from the driving side of things than I do. He also noted that the J6 FC Plus has extra dwell that makes it easier for him to shape the ball compared to the J6CR, so he would have to get used to the CR's feel and adjust. And while the J6CR does have the same optimized shape as the other J6 models, he noted the CR has an even more generous sweet spot, and that's saying a lot. With all that said, I actually look at pop a little differently than more power-focused players. For me, being control-oriented and not too big of a driver, however, this new line is giving me a chance to wear a different hat. I'm always looking at a paddle's play characteristics up at the kitchen and in the short game more than anywhere else. And while I do think the J6CR is very poppy, it never feels as if the core is holding onto the ball and then releasing it with exponential power, at least in the soft game. Remember, this core has a notch design and is in that new split core configuration. And compared to the poppy NF line, the CR cups and kisses the ball in the short game almost the way wide cell honeycomb paddles do. So while the ball only lives on the paddle head a brief moment with the J6CR, for whatever reason, you can still add action and tame the pop whenever you want to. Moreover, the feel is just super familiar. It's old school poppy, the way we used to think paddles were poppy back in the Gen 1 and Gen 2 days. And that's part of why I've never been able to truly fall in love with a full foam paddle in the past. They just feel different. And that's where the J6CR really sets itself apart from other poppy, powerful Gen 4s. To me, lots of full foam paddles that are super powerful with lots of pop, see the ball sink into the core, dwell for a bit, and then spring off. That kind of pop in quotation marks with propulsive power output can often lead to unwanted pop-ups for me because it messes with my timing. As someone that doesn't come from tennis and doesn't have a drive-focused game, I tend to hit some short flat hits, and I admittedly don't intuitively add professional level topspin to every single dink. So I always appreciate when a paddle has a lower launch angle. And based off my play testing with both the pre-production and production versions of the J6CR, I say this paddle launches the ball with a relatively low angle of trajectory, even if you don't add perfect topspin. And that means the ball sits closer to the net than you'd expect for a paddle this poppy, powerful, and with so much firepower, which leads to fewer unwanted pop-ups that you then get punished for. I've seen some folks postulate that they think this is the result of the paddle's Flexure Grooves flexing and helping correct slight mishits. And while I can't pinpoint if that's the specific feature of the dynamic Powerflex tech that's doing this, I hope it is, as I think it's something we could see lots of other paddle companies adopt and integrate into their own paddle designs relatively easily. And to be honest, with paddles getting so powerful and poppy overall, I really think players need some help in this department. Sometimes I'll go to open play and folks can't even dink inside of the kitchen during warm-ups. They're popping everything up and landing all their shots 3 inches past the kitchen line. And while that's not a huge problem if you never hit off the bounce and want to volley and drive all day, it certainly makes warm-ups annoying for us folks that are just trying to get a few dinks in at rec play. That said, if you're one of those players that likes to rip, bang, and play full tilt all the time, you can definitely do that with this paddle. However, it's also got what you need in case you do ever decide to give dinking a try. And before we move on, I do want to reemphasize what makes this paddle so special to me. It just feels great. As I said before, it's got that honeycomb feel in the soft game where the paddle cups and kisses the ball. But then it's got huge power, but power you can control on overheads, drives, and any hit with some juice. It's just awesome to me that I can have a foam paddle with the promise of extra durability backed up by Honolulu's 1-year warranty, while still having that classic pickleball paddle feel up at the kitchen. And having a huge power assist on drives, putaways, and anything with some juice behind it is exactly what I loved about Gen 3 designs, but once again, this is a foam paddle with presumably much better durability. And while I think the control joint tech is a big part of the J6CR's activated power, I'm hoping the Flexure Grooves might be playing an oversized role in this paddle's specific feel profile, because I think this is something other paddle companies could easily implement into their own paddle designs. And there's some evidence that these grooves are what's creating that activated power. Let me explain. Remember back in the Core Crush Gen 2 paddle days when broken paddles got super hot? A lot of that had to do with there being connection issues between the core and the face materials. There is compression and often gaps between the face and the core. While that uncontrolled design flaw was a problem, I think it's a clue to how to get power out of paddles that doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to traditional pickleball paddle feel in the soft game. With the CR's Flexure Grooves, those channels create gaps between the core material and the face material. To me, I think there's a high chance those channels are causing a hot touch point for the paddle for those putaways and hard drives. But unlike a core crushed or delaminated paddle, this play characteristic is the result of a very thought out design, allowing this power to be predictable. Remember, those grooves and gaps outline an ideal hitting zone pattern. Here's that CT scan from Honolulu again, showing that upside down shovel that's likely the perimeter of the sweet spot. So if you strike in that zone with some oomph, oh boy, you're gonna get some fireworks. So it plays super hot when you want it to for a hard drive or a put away, but it doesn't play hot or erratic in other instances. Instead, it feels very much like a traditional pickleball paddle on pretty much every kind of hit outside of those super hard strikes. So unless you put in a good amount of power into it, that next gear's not getting activated. All that's to say, it's pretty crazy to have a paddle with this much firepower that's so easy to control while also maintaining superb touch and feel. This combo hasn't really been seen before and is why I think the J6CR might be the very best power paddle I've ever played with. And before we talk value and my final recommendations, I have to touch on the rest of Honolulu's CR line. In addition to the J6CR we've been discussing, Honolulu already has the J2CR and the J2CR with the long handle on pre-order. Here's the specs for the OG J2 version, which features the same iconic stretched out cheeks that makes Honolulu's original J2 hybrids so stable. And then here are the specs for the long handle version. You'll notice everything is pretty much identical aside from this one having a 6-inch handle compared to the normal J2's 5.5-inch handle. And then of course this version's cheeks are slimmed down, resulting in a smaller face that gives you extra hand room on that extended handle. And then this is the J3CR, which wasn't listed on Honolulu's site as of the recording of this video. However, it's Honolulu's standard shape profile, which I've covered on the channel before and is often overshadowed by its hybrid siblings. And these are all pre-production versions. I don't know if they're as close to the final versions as my production J6CR was that I mained in December and most of January, but they all play very well. To me, the standout as of now is the J3CR. It's wicked powerful like all of the past J3s, aside from the very, very first version that was released years and years ago. It's all sweet spot with tons of forgiveness and tons of oomph. And then I actually hadn't spent a lot of time with a J2 with a long handle until testing this one, and I really love it. It's great for whips and two-handers and is more powerful feeling than the normal J2. That said, if you're needing extra stability and forgiveness, the traditional J2 shape is still the one to look at. I'll cover all of these more on the channel as soon as I get final review units. However, Honolulu is already selling out on pre-orders, so if you want to be an early adopter, you'll want to move fast. If the first batch of the J3CRs haven't gone up yet, I would definitely make sure to get in on that one in particular, as I think it's going to be very popular. Finally, I have this awesome looking yellow paddle called the J6CRh, which tons and tons of people have been asking me about over on Instagram. Also, if you're not following me over there, you definitely should. That's where I post tons of updates as well as run some giveaways that are exclusive to Instagram. And long story short, this was a prototype that Honolulu sent out to reviewers that they're probably not going to move forward with. It features a different core design than the rest of the CRs and utilizes Honolulu's special H-face layup that they've used in the past, including on the J2H Plus, which is probably the most underrated Honolulu paddle of all time. That paddle came out after their initial Gen 3 paddles and got completely overlooked, but that was my absolute favorite Honolulu paddle up until the CR line and is still the paddle I would recommend to folks wanting a next gen paddle on a budget that's included on Honolulu's crazy refresh program. I detail that over in my review of that paddle for anyone curious. As for the J6CRh, the H layup is kind of an interesting choice as all the other CR paddles feature fiberglass in the layups as well, and that's what was always different with Honolulu's H paddles. So I'm actually not sure how the H layup differs compared to the other CRs. I presume the fiberglass is placed in a different order with its carbon fiber sheets, so not the middle like it is with the other CRs, but I don't believe Honolulu's ever disclosed the specific configuration of their H layups. In fact, if I remember right, Honolulu used to claim it was proprietary and only revealed fiberglass was involved after the initial couple H releases. Regardless, my initial impression of this paddle actually wasn't very good. I thought it played mushy and didn't have any of the feel of the other CR paddles. However, I did play with it some more and it eventually firmed up a bit, and I actually got to liking it. That said, it doesn't have the same level of activated power as the rest of the CR line, and it sits closer to an all-court, at least based off my initial testing. And while it's got great control, this particular segment of paddles is pretty well covered by other options in Honolulu's line. Additionally, Honolulu's owner told me they will likely not pursue this particular core design, but I don't know if that means they're going to bring the H layup to the CR series down the road in another way. They've yet to do that with the NF or FC Plus lines, so I'm doubting it. However, I really do hope they bring this banana yellow color to their paddles somehow, because I think it's freaking sick. Okay, I know that was a lot, but one big question remains. Are these paddles worth their $175.50 price tag after promo code Matthew K knocks off 10%? And the answer is pretty simple. Absolutely 100% yes. These are some of the best paddles I've ever had the chance to check out, and if you're someone that assigns value to power, then they're worth every bit of $333. In other words, you can get Boomstick power, but without the Boomstick price. But more importantly, it's power you can control with a traditional paddle feel, which isn't the case with pretty much every other full foam paddle. To be honest, the more difficult question to answer will be which one to get. Personally, I think the J6CR is a great option for lots and lots of players. While it is elongated, my particular unit felt super fast in the hands, and I appreciated the extra reach and driving power. That said, if you want to maximize sweet spot with a mini hand cannon, the J3CR is the one to look at. And then I've really enjoyed the whipping potential of the J2CR with that long handle, but if you want or need extra stability, you're going to want to stick with the OG J2 King with those stretched out cheeks. I'll follow up with a more detailed overview video once I get the final versions of the rest of the line, and I'll also share updates as quickly as I can over on my podcast, so make sure you subscribe. That said, after having had the chance to compare a late pre-production J6CR with the final version, I don't foresee any potential issues or surprises with the new shapes based off the pre-production units I've hit. However, if you do end up pre-ordering any of these, make sure you review the delivery dates and take note this line is in very high demand. Don't be surprised if your order takes a beat to arrive. But if you're patient and are able to wait, I don't think you'll be disappointed with what arrives on your doorstep. This line is freaking awesome. And that's pretty much all I've got. If you end up grabbing one, be sure to use promo code MatthewK to get the lowest price on the CR line, as well as on Honolulu's other CF and titanium paddles. If you end up purchasing one of Honolulu's Kevlar paddles, you'll want to use promo code MatthewKevlar. And then if you ever buy a paddle while it's on super sale, my special promo code MatthewKSale will save you an extra $5. Like always, anytime you make a purchase using one of my codes, I receive a small commission that helps keep the channel running and is super appreciated. And before we get into today's giveaway, I wanted to let you know there's another giveaway on the channel for a free Loco paddle in my recent review of that awesome line from Bread and Butter. If you haven't checked that video out, you definitely should, as I think it's one of the absolute best lines to come out in 2025. As for today's raffle, I'm super pumped to share that Honolulu is letting me give one of their CR paddles away for free. All you need to do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment which one you're most interested in and why, and then fill out the Google form in the description so I have a way to contact you if you win. And that's it. I'll run the raffle in about a month, so be on the lookout for an email. Good luck. Finally, if you found this video helpful, please consider using promo code MatthewK on your next pickleball paddle purchase to help support the channel. I've got a lot of the popular brands listed below, and my master list has even more. And I'll be sure to leave a link to Honolulu's site at the very top. You can also support the channel by purchasing some of the other cool pickleball gear I've been testing out by using the links and codes in the video description below. On top of that, I have a special link to my favorite pickleball gear you can get on Amazon down there as well, and that's got some really cool hidden gems you wouldn't expect. And then of course, hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and slamming that notification bell all go a long way to helping me out as well. Thank you so much for the support. But most importantly, I hope you get to pickle soon, and just don't forget, it's about having fun.